Hello, my name is Mr. Dreadingtale. Let's get started with the Airbnb stories. It was back in September 2019, right after Labor Day. I was in Austin, Texas for a work conference, staying at this little Airbnb bungalow in the East Side neighborhood. The weather was still muggy as hell, that late summer stickiness where you sweat through your shirt just walking from the car. I remember I had on these gray cargo shorts and a plain blue polo, nothing fancy because I'd packed light for the 3 days. The host, this guy named Mark, seemed normal at first. Mid-40s, balding, wore khakis and a button-up like he was heading to an office job. He met me at the door with the key, showed me around the place. Small kitchen, queen bed in the back, a patio with string lights. We chatted a bit. I mentioned I was from Chicago, working in tech sales. He nodded, said he'd lived in Austin his whole life, worked in real estate. Nothing weird there. I settled in, unpacked my suitcase, and headed out for the evening session at the convention center. Next morning, I'm making coffee in the kitchen, and Mark knocks on the door. Says he's just checking if everything's okay. Offers to recommend a breakfast spot. I say sure, and we talk for maybe 5 minutes. Out of nowhere, he asks about my sister, calls her by name, Emily. Asks if she's still teaching high school in the suburbs. I freeze up because, yeah, she is. But how the hell does he know that? I hadn't mentioned family at all. I play it cool, say, yeah, she's good, and change the subject. He smiles like it's no big deal and leaves. That night, I get back late, around 11 p.m., after drinks with colleagues. The place is quiet, but there's a note on the counter. Try the tacos at Torchy's. Your dad always loved spicy food. My dad? He passed away in 2016 from cancer, and yeah, he did love spicy stuff, but again, I hadn't said a word about him. My heart's pounding, but I tell myself maybe I mentioned it without remembering, or it's a coincidence. I locked the bedroom door that night, even though it's just a flimsy interior one. Last day, I'm packing up early, and Mark comes by to say goodbye. He hands me a little bag with a keychain from a Chicago Cubs game. Says he thought I'd like it since I grew up going to Wrigley with my buddies. That's specific. I did, back in the 90s, but it's not something on my social media or anything public. I ask him straight up how he knows all this stuff about me. He just looks confused, tilts his head, and says, "What do you mean? You told me yesterday." But I didn't. I know I didn't. I left, drove to the airport, and that was it. Never reviewed the place, never contacted him again. It's been over 6 years, and I still turn it over in my head at night. How he knew those details, why he acted like it was nothing. I've never told the full thing to anyone until now. It just sits there, wrong in a way I can't shake. It was February 2017, the weekend after Valentine's Day. My buddy Chris and I had rented this old A-frame cabin up near Red River, New Mexico. Nothing fancy, just a cheap Airbnb so we could snowboard for a couple days. We got in late Friday night, February 17th, I think, both still wearing the same clothes from the drive. Me in that black Carhartt beanie and the gray hoodie I pretty much lived in that winter. Chris in his beat-up brown puffer jacket with the torn pocket. Saturday morning, we woke up to a full-on blizzard. Wind howling. Snow piling so fast you couldn't see the trees 20 feet out. Cell service was already gone. We figured we'd just hang out, play cards, drink the case of Coors we brought. The host had left a note saying the plows don't come up the private road till Monday at the earliest, so we were stuck. Around 3 in the afternoon, there's a knock at the door. Hard to hear over the wind, but definite. Chris looks at me like, "Who the hell?" I open it, and there's this guy standing there. Mid-30s maybe, clean-shaven, wearing a navy pea coat that's way too nice for the mountains. Snow all over him, but not like he'd been walking long. He asks if he can come in, says his name is David, that his Jeep slid off the road a quarter-mile back and he saw our lights. Voice is calm, almost too calm. We let him in. He takes the coat off, hangs it by the door like he's been here before. Doesn't shake off the snow or anything. Chris offers him a beer. He says, "Sure, thanks." Then he sits down on the couch and starts talking, like he knows us. Says, "You guys still doing that fantasy football league with the buy-in that got out of hand?" Chris and I just stare at each other. We do have a league, been running it since 2011. But the buy-in thing was a stupid fight we had last fall that only the 10 guys in the group would know about. I never posted it anywhere. Chris laughs it off, asks how he knows that. David just smiles and says, "You told me last time I was up here with you." Except we'd never seen this guy in our lives. I ask when that was supposed to be. He thinks for a second and says, "February? 2 years ago, maybe? Same storm, same weekend." Chris and I rented this exact cabin for the first time in 2017. This trip. There was no last time. The afternoon drags on. Power flickers but stays on. David keeps dropping these little things. Mentions the scar on my left knee from when I wiped out at Breckenridge in 2014. Asks Chris if his mom ever got that hip replacement she was scared about. Every detail perfect. We stop asking how he knows. It feels pointless. By night, the storm's worse. We're all sitting around the coffee table. David looks at his watch, some silver Rolex that probably cost more than my car, and says he's going to head back to his Jeep, wait it out there. We tell him that's insane. He'll freeze. He just shrugs, puts the pea coat back on, says, "I'll be fine. Always am." Walks out into the whiteout like it's nothing. We watched from the window. The second he stepped off the porch, he was gone. Not even footprints in the fresh snow the next morning. We left as soon as the road opened Monday. Never talked about it after that weekend. Not once. I still drive past the turnoff for Red River sometimes, and my stomach knots up. 8 years later, and I've never told anyone the whole thing until right now. I still don't know who he was waiting for that weekend, or why it felt like it was us. It was the last week of June 2021. Portland, Oregon, during that freak heat dome. 113 degrees every day, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick and angry. I'd booked a little studio apartment on the 3rd floor of an old house in Southeast, near Division. The listing said, "Private entrance, quiet professional, preferred." I remember walking up the outside stairs in a white tank top that was already soaked through with sweat by 9 a.m., dragging my rolling suitcase behind me. The host was named Rachel. She met me at the door, maybe 35, short brown hair, wearing a loose linen dress and no shoes. Smiled too wide, handed me the key, said she lived downstairs with her husband and that they hardly ever used the upstairs anymore. Something about the way she said it stuck with me, but I was dying in the heat and just wanted the AC unit she'd promised. First 2 days were fine. I worked remotely, kept to myself. The studio was small, 1 room, kitchenette, bathroom, a single window that looked down into their backyard. On the 3rd night, I was on a late call, headphones in, pacing by that window. I glanced down and saw Rachel and her husband in the yard. They were just standing there, facing the house, staring straight up at my window, not waving, not talking, just looking. It was almost midnight, still 90 degrees out. I stepped back, fast, heart racing. But when I looked again 30 seconds later, they were gone. Next morning, there's a knock at my private door. Rachel's holding a plate of cut-up watermelon. Says she thought I might want something cold. I thank her, take it. She lingers and asks if I slept okay. Then, out of nowhere, she says, "You always walk in your sleep when it's this hot, huh?" I laugh, confused. Tell her I don't sleepwalk, never have. She tilts her head, gives this tiny smile, and says, "That's funny. You came down the stairs last night around 2, stood in the backyard for a while. I figured you were cooling off." I felt the blood leave my face. I'd been dead asleep, woke up in the exact same spot on the bed, sheets barely moved. I know I didn't leave the studio. The door was still deadbolted from the inside. I didn't sleep the rest of the trip, kept every light on, left a day early, made up some work excuse. When I handed the key back, Rachel just said, "Come back anytime. The upstairs is always open for you." Like she already knew I'd been there before. I still have the confirmation email. Sometimes I open it at 2 a.m. and stare at the dates, trying to remember if I maybe stayed there once before and forgot. I never have. But every time the heat spikes in summer, I get this sick twist in my gut. Like part of me did walk down those stairs that night and is still standing in their yard, waiting for the rest of me to catch up. I've never told anyone the whole thing until tonight.
I'm a 32-year-old office manager named Jenny from Topeka, Kansas. I'm single, living in a cozy little ranch house on the outskirts of town with my tabby cat Whiskers and a few hardy houseplants that somehow survive my neglect. Life's pretty routine. Work, Netflix, occasional coffee with friends. But last Christmas, everything shifted when my Aunt Evelyn sent me that vintage sweater. It arrived in a plain brown paper package, no festive wrapping or card, just a scribbled note. "Saw this at an estate sale in Omaha and thought of you. Merry Christmas." I unwrapped it carefully, revealing a cream-colored sweater with subtle blue patterns woven throughout, floral yet abstract, like whispers of vines and petals. The fabric was incredibly soft, finer than any wool I'd felt, almost silky. I slipped it on over my favorite blouse, and it fit like it was tailored for me. That evening, I wore it to the office holiday party. Colleagues raved about it. "Looks expensive," one said. "Antique, maybe from the 40s or 50s, another guessed. I felt elegant, a rare boost from my usual jeans and tee style. A couple of days later, as I hung it in my closet, a faint odor wafted up, like aged leather mixed with a sharp chemical tang. I shrugged it off at first, but it lingered. I washed it on the delicate cycle with my gentlest detergent, yet the smell persisted, clinging like a bad memory. Then came the itching. Red patches bloomed on my arms and chest where the sweater had touched my skin. Small, insistent itches that turned into burning sensations. I figured it was an allergy, maybe to the wool or residue from storage. I switched detergents, but the irritation worsened, evolving into tiny blisters that wept clear fluid. Worried, I visited Dr. Ramirez, my family physician. She examined the rashes, nodding knowingly. "Contact dermatitis, most likely," she diagnosed. "Avoid the irritant and use this steroid cream twice a day." I nodded, relieved for an explanation, and stashed the sweater deep in my closet, behind old winter coats I never wore. But even without it, the itching nagged at me, like invisible threads burrowing under my skin. Nights grew restless. I'd toss and turn, my mind fixating on the sweater. One sleepless midnight, I dragged it out and examined it under my desk lamp's harsh glow. The texture felt alive, almost breathing against my palm. Up close, the threads weren't uniform like machine-spun yarn. They varied in thickness, with minuscule pores dotting the surface. If I squinted, faint lines resembled veins, pulsing subtly in the light. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't normal. I turned to the internet, Googling vintage sweaters materials and scrolling through forums. Nothing matched. Emboldened, I snapped photos and posted them on a Reddit subreddit for antique clothing enthusiasts. Anyone know what this is made of? Super soft, but causing skin issues. Replies trickled in. Cashmere blend? Angora rabbit fur? But one user, u/obscure histories, slid into my DMs. That reminds me of stuff from old medical texts. Get it tested at a lab. Could be something unconventional. I laughed it off initially, but the persistent itch made me reconsider. The rashes weren't healing. If anything, they spread. On a whim, I drove 2 hours to a forensic materials lab in Kansas City, the kind that analyzes evidence for law enforcement. I felt foolish handing over the sweater in a Ziploc bag, explaining I wanted a composition test. The technician arched an eyebrow but accepted it, quoting me for microscopy, chemical analysis, and even DNA sequencing if it proved organic. I paid the rush fee and waited anxiously. A week later, the lab director, Dr. Harlan, called personally. "Ms. Thompson, could you come in? It's better discussed face to face." My stomach nodded as I entered his sterile office. Metal desks, humming fluorescents, file cabinets overflowing with reports. The sweater sat on the table in a sealed evidence bag. Dr. Harlan cleared his throat. "This isn't wool or any animal fiber. It's leather. Human leather. Tanned and processed into threads." I blinked, the room spinning. "Human what?" He explained. Forensic tests revealed human DNA from multiple sources, pieced together like a macabre quilt. The blue patterns? Faded tattoos, stitched from strips of skin. Pores, hair follicles, even dermal layers matched human tissue, preserved with early 20th century chemicals like formaldehyde and tannins. "Where did you acquire this?" he pressed. I stammered about Aunt Evelyn and the Omaha estate sale. He nodded gravely. "Items like this surface occasionally. War relics, black market curiosities from World War II era. Rare to see them fashioned into garments." Shaken, I drove home with the bagged sweater in my trunk, untouched. I phoned Aunt Evelyn that evening. She recalled buying it from an elderly vendor at the sale, who claimed it was a family heirloom from his grandfather's collection. No details beyond that. Digging online, I found the estate belonged to a 92-year-old recluse, Elias Hawthorne, a World War II medic in Europe. His obituary mentioned a vast collection of oddities from the war, medical instruments, artifacts, no surviving family. That night, sleep evaded me again. My thoughts swirled around the origins. Whose skin? Volunteers? Victims of atrocities? The lab's DNA analysis indicated at least 3 individuals, 2 females, 1 male, likely Caucasian, but degraded samples limited certainty. I envisioned the horrific process: flaying, curing, spinning into yarn, knitting into a sweater. Why clothing? To immortalize the dead? To wear their essence? The next morning, I built a fire in my backyard pit and burned it. Flames licked the fabric, curling edges black, releasing a stench of singed hair and roasting meat that made me gag. I hoped that ended it, but the itching intensified. Back to Dr. Ramirez, who ordered biopsies on the persistent blisters. Results? Microscopic fibers embedded in my dermis, human collagen traces, like the sweater had shed invasive particles that fused with my tissue. Changes accelerated. My skin softened unnaturally, smoother than ever. Scratching revealed faint blue lines beneath, like emerging tattoos, floral, abstract, mirroring the sweater's design. I hid them under long sleeves at work, smiling through meetings while my body betrayed me. No one noticed, or if they did, they said nothing. Last week, horror peaked. A loose thread protruded from my elbow. I tugged gently, and a small skin flap peeled away, soft, pore-dotted, with tiny hairs. Under a magnifying glass, it was identical to the sweater's material. I haven't confided in anyone. Who'd believe me? Tonight, Mirror gazing revealed the patterns spreading across my chest, knitting inward like a living tapestry. The lab called again, mentioning a discovery in the hem's residue, a message woven in microscopic stitches. Wear me and become us. I think I'll stick to long sleeves forever, but whispers emanate from my skin at night, faint, overlapping voices in unknown tongues, sharing fragmented tales of pain and loss. It's getting colder in Topeka. Winter's bite demands warmth. Might need a sweater soon. Or perhaps I'm becoming one.